From training camp.
You guys are fired up and ready to go to work.
To the preseason. Through the playoffs. And into the offseason.
To be able to get the best players, it's a critical time for us.
It's always Colts season. This is Colts Corner with Kevin Bowen.
Week 2, we are back. Colts Corner, Kevin Bowen, Eddie Garrison with you here on a Wednesday afternoon. The routine of 2 pods a week now alive and well. On today's edition, certainly look at a game that has changed a whole lot here in the last week. Vegas has got the spread changing by 7, 8 points. With Jordan Love's injury situation, Malik Willis under center. We'll talk Colts and Packers and just the beyond unfortunate news of JuJu Brents suffering another significant injury. So that'll be the focus on today's podcast. Eddie, how you doing, sir?
Doing well. How are you?
Doing well. Well, Greg Olsen action.
Yeah.
Coming up on Sunday. Don't think Olsen
Joe
has
Davis
had
and Greg Olsen.
too many Colts games in his career. I was reminded Colts-Patriots, I think, the Jonathan Taylor infamous game, the big run by Taylor. It was an Olsen game. I totally forgot about that. Someone at the Colts was telling me that today. So looking forward to that. And boy, man, I love Lambeau. That skinny tunnel, the non-corporate feel, the neighborhood around it. Looks like, at least temperature-wise, supposed to be pretty nice on Sunday. So
will you be there?
For Colts, I'll not.
Come on, Kevin.
Yeah, too quick of a turnaround of that early alarm on Monday. What is that, a 6-hour drive?
Sure. Get home at like 11 o'clock?
Well, you got to write after the game, and I would not be getting home at 11 o'clock.
That's where you need an editor.
I can assure you of that. Well, yeah, you and I will take that up with the higher-ups here in this building. But cannot encourage anyone to make sure you check out Lambeau for those that are going up there. Usually it's a highly attended road game. Enjoy it. Before we get into Packers, Colts, you got to start with the news item of the week. And just flat out sucks. When you think to JuJu Brents' NFL career, Eddie, I hate to do it, but it's just the reality of where he's at right now. We're about a year and a half into his NFL career, and we're talking about 8 different injuries that have caused him to miss game and or practice time. He had the wrist surgery exiting Kansas State, missed that entire spring off-season program, and then he gets the hamstring in camp, misses the first 2 weeks of his rookie season. Plays the next 5, then a quad injury, out for 6 games. Comes back for the final 5, and then I kind of forgot, he got hurt in that season finale, the first half of that season finale. He got hurt in that win and get-in game against Houston. Then this year, he's got the ankle cleanup after the spring off-season program. Shoulder issue sidelined him for a day or two in camp. The freakish broken nose against the Cardinals. And now this on Sunday, which, by all accounts, I think it occurred like sometime in the second quarter. He got looked at briefly on the sideline, never went into the medical tent, and then came back and, you saw him make the almost interception play there in the third quarter. And then, obviously after the game, it flared up a little bit more. So 8 different injuries, 4 surgeries in the last 2 years. And in a way, Eddie, it's kind of similar to Jelani Woods in regards to the position. It's a position that you have present questions, and now this news item creates even more future questions as well. And that's where you're at with Jelani Woods at tight end, and that's where you're at with JuJu Brents here, as now he will have played. If you play out the next few months, let's say he returns in mid-December, he'll have played in, 10 of 30 NFL games by that point?
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't take into account, obviously, all of the practice time he has missed. So just starting there, Eddie, you just hate it. Hate it for a guy that has had awful injury luck.
Yeah, so the Colts today signed Ronnie Harrison Jr. and Kelvin Joseph to the practice squad. Obviously, we are familiar with Ronnie Harrison Jr., but Kelvin Joseph, a former second-round pick by the Dallas Cowboys in 2021. And then they signed Samuel Womack after the roster was trimmed down to 53.
Yeah, Chris Lamons got the bump up yesterday with JuJu going to IR.
Sunday. And you got the bump up on Sunday, too.
Yeah, he got the bump up on Sunday, and then he got the 53-man bump up yesterday with that JuJu news. Let me quickly just touch on a brief Wednesday injury report. We'll see if it comes out during the podcast. If it doesn't, My eyes saw Josh Downs practicing. They said Matt Gay was practicing. I didn't see him. DeForest Buckner did not practice. I didn't spot Julian Blackmon. Is that related to Ronnie Harrison Jr. at all? I don't know. But, maybe he'll show up on the injury report. Who knows? And then Kwity Paye was walking, I would say, a little gingerly as he was watching practice. So, again, it's a Wednesday injury report. Take it with a grain of salt, but things to monitor as the week moves along. Okay, let's start here. How should they replace JuJu Brents? I think you got a couple options in the sense of, do you keep Kenny Moore as a slot or not?
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think everybody knows this, but just to reiterate, Jalen Jones and Kenny Moore are their base corners. When they're in the 2 cornerback base grouping, 3 linebackers on the field, it's Kenny and it's Jalen Jones.
Mm-hmm.
JuJu was the 3rd corner on Sunday. Played 62 of 79 snaps, whereas Jones and Kenny played all 79 of them. So what do you do with that 3rd corner spot? You could bump Kenny outside and put someone in at the slot. I would argue they have more adequate slot depth right now than they do outside corner depth. Now, of course, some would counter and say, wait a minute, Kenny's such a great slot corner. Why would you take him out of that? That's totally fair. You could obviously say that, but these are some of the discussions that they have to have. If they go outside corner and want to leave Kenny in the slot or nickel, is Dallas Flowers that guy? I mean, we're talking about a guy that I thought had some shaky moments in camp. He's less than a year removed from the torn Achilles. I would expect, frankly, some shaky moments from him, coming off that sort of injury. And then they have a slew of practice squad cornerbacks that you mentioned. I think there's 4 of them in total, some that have started games in the NFL. You mentioned Joseph. I think David Long Jr. is another one, Amir Speed.
Jalen Simpson.
Their rookie out of Auburn, who, again, is not a full-time corner, or at least was not that, I should say, in college. So they have options. But I think that's what they have to decide, what they want to do there. Again, I think Kenny and Jalen are your base. And I would say the best news of all of this, if there is such a thing as best news, Eddie, it's the 3 quarterbacks you play the next 3 weeks. Like, from a timing standpoint on the schedule, I think this comes at a decent to better than decent time. It's Malik Willis. It's Caleb Williams. And again, we're going off of 1 week of Caleb Williams, which is probably a bit unfair, but obviously he didn't look very potent in that opener. And then it's potentially Justin Fields and or Russell Wilson. If this would have happened in mid-October, I'm pretty sure they have a stretch at one point of like Stroud and then I think Tua and Allen are like, maybe in like a 4-week stretch, they play those 3 quarterbacks. So again, there are, I guess, worse times to have this. And I bring that up to say, whatever you decide to throw in there week 2, can you let that, trio of corners grow together? And then by the time you do face Stroud again and you see Tua and you see Allen or Aaron Rodgers or Jared Goff, you feel a little bit more equipped to handle it. So I think that kind of covers everything. JuJu injury / how should they replace him? It doesn't seem like there are a lot of older corners out on the free agent market. Kella Witherspoon is a name I know a lot of people brought up. I think he just signed with the Rams earlier today. So I know the Colts worked out some guys, but, again, it doesn't look like they are taking that route. Anything on that end, Eddie, just like, again, how to replace JuJu necessarily?
I mean, you looked at it. You can look at how they did it last year. This is pretty comparable, right? And how they replaced him.
Yeah, but again, it's okay. Where's Dallas Flowers out coming off the Achilles? And Darrell Baker Jr. is not here. So, what I'm saying is it's new names in terms of how you are going to have to replace him. And I guess let's just kind of transition there. And you know what? Part of me is kind of like, I could bring out all the receipts. I could have you find audio clips from months and months ago. Hell, I sent out, some screenshots yesterday. Like, I do feel like I'm just kind of repeating myself in a way of that. We, unfortunately, shouldn't be shocked by this news. And it falls in the category of why there needed to be more secondary insurance this offseason. And again, secondary insurance doesn't have to be the most expensive insurance out there. Now, I'm not saying you need to, resurrect Ronnie Lott or Bob Sanders, but you can find guys that have been adequate, and certainly the Colts have done that before, whether it is, again, the Mike Mitchells or the Mike Adams or the Rodney McLeods or the TJ Carries or the Pierre Desires of the world. So, as I've laid out many times this offseason, to me, what is very confusing about the lack of secondary attention is the fact that there are 4 boxes that remain very unchecked for me entering the season. 4 of them. And those 4 boxes, to repeat myself, and I apologize, is Nick Cross good? Box 1. Box 2, is Julian Blackmon and Jalen Jones good? Are they good? Box 3, can Julian Blackmon stay healthy? And then box 4, can JuJu Brents stay healthy? And, I asked Shane Steichen, because he is a spokesperson now for the team. We don't talk to Chris Ballard. So, Shane's the guy today. And I asked Shane can you remind us what kept you guys from making a notable move in the secondary? And then the follow-up was, did you have any concerns about JuJu injury-wise? And, Shane, again, it should be a Ballard question, but, this is a reality of NFL teams when the season gets here. You're at the mercy of the head coach. And, he answers it, and, no, you can't predict injuries, and it's like, okay, is there an element of injuries that they can be flukish? Yes. But you have to cover your ass with some insurance when, you can make the analogy of this is like a 16-year-old behind the wheel versus a driver's ed teacher behind the wheel. That's, we're not talking about DeForest Buckner's bill of health or Quentin Nelson's bill of health or somebody like that. And let's be honest. Let's look at the Colts, Eddie. They have made health-related decisions in the past. Why didn't Julian Blackmon get more than a 1-year re-sign? Why wasn't Malik Hooker brought back?
Injuries. Why
was Tyquan Lewis just 1 year? Prove a deal from a couple of cycles ago. Jack Mewhort, if you want to go, past cycles ago. Again, kind of that 1 year prove it deal. So that's where I just don't understand it. I know I'm repeating myself, but it's the reality of the news cycle with where this news item is at this week. I've said this many times on this podcast. There are things that Chris Ballard does that I don't agree with, but I understand where he's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
This one, I don't agree with, and I don't understand where he's coming from. Both of those things. And again, it's not like Ballard's had an abundance of these in my time covering the team where I just sit here and I'm like, what the heck? Yeah, I mean, sure, there's a handful of them. But this one, to me, I would argue is one of the most confusing of all. And you're at a position right now where you're in scramble mode out there at what I would consider a premium position. And, you've cut your own draft picks, whether that's Darius Rush or Micah Abraham or Jalen Simpson. You look at a guy like Darrell Baker Jr., who I actually thought had a halfway decent camp. I thought he looked better than Dallas Flowers in camp. And you cut him when you claim Samuel Womack. And by doing that, you're keeping 20 offensive and defensive linemen. But you're only keeping 5 corners and really only probably 3 outside corners if you want to get technical there. So it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me on that end. Again, I know we're repeating ourselves by going down this sort of topic, but it's where we're at right now with JuJu Brents. Anything else from you, JuJu related?
Nothing for me in that regard. I think you pretty much got everything summarized up there.
You want to move into the Packers?
Yes. Green Bay obviously dealing with a quarterback injury to Jordan Love. Now, if he cannot suit up, as we talked about on Monday, it would be Malik Willis. There hasn't been any confirmation that Jordan Love is out yet. They're leaving the door, cracked, as I would probably best put it. But if Jordan Love is out, it'll be Malik Willis. Sean Clifford will be the backup in their first game in Brazil against Philly. Love was 17 of 34, 260, 2 touchdowns with an interception. Josh Jacobs got going there in the second half for Green Bay. His final line was 16 carries for 84 yards. Jaden Reed is the guy who I think presents the biggest problem for the Colts. He had a carry for 33 yards and a touchdown, 4 receptions, 138 yards and a touchdown. He had another touchdown that was called back. He is certainly their biggest threat in terms of making explosive plays.
Yeah, very, very dynamic.
And I don't think you can overlook Christian Watson either. I think he's very, very explosive down the field. And when they get in the red zone, That's who they target.
I think the Packers are a really good and balanced football team. I like a lot of what they have. I thought Josh Jacobs showed in week 1 that he still has plenty of tread left in those tires as well. But, Eddie, there's a reason Vegas has moved this line by more than a touchdown.
The quarterback.
I think I said it on Monday, and I'll say it again here. I don't think there's a steeper drop-off in all of football right now, from starter to backup, than Jordan Love to Malik Willis. And part of it has to do with where we're at here on September 11th. I mean, he's been a Packer for 15 days.
Yeah.
I mean, what does he know? What can't? I mean, how many passes has he thrown to these guys? It's a bit baffling. This is how Green Bay's handled their backup spot. I mean, Green Bay, I think, is like a sleeper NFC type of contender. You know, I mean, they were a Final Four team last year in the NFC. I mean, you know, they should be having, I think, more of a proven backup to get them through, you know, this situation.
I had them in the Super Bowl.
There you go. And I don't laugh at that. Like, I think that is a pretty, you know, a little outside the box, but I think it makes sense. You know, obviously Willis's career has not gone at all according to plan. You know, part of me is like, wait, he couldn't beat out Mason Rudolph for the backup spot in Tennessee? I think I'm reminding myself, as much as I think the Colts should and ultimately will win this game, I can't ignore what happened last year with what P.J. Walker did, with what Taylor Heineke did, with what Jake Browning did.
Yep.
I mean, Jake Browning's best game of the season, best game of his career probably, against the Colts. Taylor Heineke's best game of the season against the Colts. And P.J. Walker, yes, the officials aided him there late in that drive. He still came up with some big fourth quarter plays against you to win that game in your own building.
Yeah.
So I don't want to lose sight of that. And I think going back to those 3 specific examples, Eddie, what I'm struck by in those games that was lacking was when these types of quarterbacks are in the game, what do you think about as a defense?
Dialing up the pressure to get to them.
It's your chance to feast. Foam at the mouth thinking about facing these quarterbacks. And if you look at it, the Colts forced just two turnovers in 182 snaps against those 3 guys. And again, if you're facing 3 backup quarterbacks and you're out there for 180 snaps, I am of the thinking of that turnover number needs to be higher. And I might be getting greedy, but that's kind of where I'm at with this. You know, I'll be curious, how much does Green Bay cater more of the college offense to Malik Willis, given the fact that he has a bit more of a run threat than certainly Jordan Love does? But that's kind of where I look at things from a Green Bay standpoint. You know, as far as the Colts and the run game is concerned, let's start with the run defense. You know, theoretically, if the Colts playing 10 guys on Sunday, that means come fourth quarter time, you're well rested.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that was probably if you had to slice out the most disappointing thing about the most disappointing element of the game, it was what Houston did to you in the fourth quarter. 80 yards rushing. You know they're going to run it. They run it right at you. You're supposed to be this well-rested team. The threat of C.J. Stroud as a passer has lessened. I think Stroud threw 5 passes the entire fourth quarter. You know, when you factor all of that in, you know, I'm expecting the $150 million or whatever they put into that front 7 this offseason with all those contract extensions to deliver for you. And you didn't do that. You know, this run game, I think, could look a little different in that, A, you aren't somewhat worried about the pass, which obviously they were with Houston. And then again, Willis does bring a little bit more of certainly more of a leg element than Stroud does as an outright, you know, runner there. That's probably where I'm at, kind of Colts defensively wise. Again, I'm not overly worried about JuJu Brents out for this game. I don't think Stroud's capable, frankly, of Willis is capable of really, really testing you in that manner. I'd say kind of flipping over to the Colts offense. The Colts don't appear to be worried about their run game. And I think I agree with them. Like, I mean, I certainly led you astray in week 1 about Jonathan Taylor and the over-under on yards. But, like, I feel like the Colts will get that going. So I would agree with them there. And I think the biggest question I have exiting week 1 surrounding Anthony Richardson is this, Eddie. The myths and the hypotheticals and the dreams about watching Anthony Richardson's deep ball float through the air, it's now on film. It's now real.
Yes, sir.
The whole NFL world has seen it. And again, how many times this offseason did I say, I feel like the Colts now have a chance to strike fear into opposing defenses.
Yeah.
Well, now you've put evidence. Now Jeff Hafley can put up the film in Green Bay and say, guys, look what he did last weekend. And now Jeff Hafley has to decide, how do we defend that? Are you this team that now is backing that shell up even more? Okay, if you do that, theoretically, shouldn't that lighten the box? Shouldn't that create a few more, areas for the Colts to make something happen?
Yeah.
Either A, in the underneath passing game, or just B, in the rushing attack as well. So, that's now the question moving forward for NFL teams. Because, most teams, obviously, they want to opt for the approach of, let's not get beat deep. Let's make Anthony Richardson, 10 plays, 12 plays, et cetera, and see if he can kind of methodically, march down the field. And boy, I mean, I've watched that play so many times. It is freaking incredible. The slip, the roll to the left, the poise, the in stride. I'm in awe of so much of the play, and I'm in awe by Alec Pierce. I think I touched on this on Monday, but that ball is in the shadows, out of the shadows, in the shadows, out of the shadows, and boom, Pierce locates that ball, beats Derek Stingley Jr., and makes the play. Shane Steichen threw out it's reminiscent of a Mahomes to Tyreek Hill play in 2020. Jim Bob Cooter threw up the Rodgers Hail Mary against the Lions.
Ah, yeah.
All great plays. If you separate time and score and just evaluate the play itself, Richardson's throw is better than all of them. I mean, it is. It's just it's an insane display of athletic ability from him.
By the way, can you tell me how long Jonathan Taylor's longest rush was against Houston?
Yeah, I've got the box score right over here. I believe.
I've got it up. I just didn't know.
Oh, you do?
Yes.
So Mixon's was 13. Was Taylor's 7?
That is correct. Now, I bring that up to ask you this. How many times do you think in his career where he's had at least 10 carries?
Oh, it's a great question.
Has he not had a rush over 10 yards?
Gosh, it's got
10 yards or over.
Once, twice?
Once.
Who was that against?
Detroit in 2021.
It's equally as stunning as the run defense. Because you're used to just busting one. Every team has the one. I looked up the Derrick Henry game from a few years ago when he went off against the Colts, and he had like a 30-yarder in that game. Mixon didn't even have the 30-yarder. So, it's just I'd be stunned if you weren't able to show that. I'm super curious to see if Josh Downs can get out there this week. Because, again, I think he can help you be steadier in the passing game. He mentioned today he was kind of 70% last week, up to 80 or 90% he feels like this week. Needs to make cuts without thinking about the ankle. That's kind of the big step for him. Again, today's his first practice in 5 weeks.
Yeah.
So, I don't think it's a guarantee, but certainly something to watch. And I would say just Richardson related for me going into Sunday, Eddie, is this. First off, Jeff Hafley comes from Boston College, and they faced Philly last week. So you will have a defensive coordinator that is probably implementing some sort of defensive game plan that is either A, similar to what they just did last week, or B, his college history has seen more of this than most coordinators.
Yes.
So, that is kind of an angle of I don't think this is a foreign concept you're throwing at, Wink Martindale or, some old crusty defensive coordinator. But for Richardson specifically, it's this. Again, hitting the singles is something I've said quite often. You go back and you watch Sunday, 9 of 19. But again, Houston got their hands on 7 of those 19 balls. That is way too high of a ratio.
Oh, yeah.
Way too high. That's playing with some fire. Way too high of a percentage on that. Because inevitably, you're just not going to hit 350-yarders a game.
Nope.
So let's say you hit one of them, which would still be a historic rate. If he hits 150-yarder all season long, it'd be an insane rate. Let's say he does that. That means that 2 touchdown drives, because each 50-yarder either led to a touchdown or led to an eventual touchdown.
Yep.
That means you've got to turn 2 of those 50-yarders into methodical-ish drives. Okay, so how do you do that? Again, giving more of your guys the chance to make plays, giving A.D. Mitchell a few more of those opportunities than just the 5 targets and the 1 catch. I feel like him and Pittman were just a little bit off as well. So I think those are kind of the 2 areas. It's there were a lot of turnover-ish balls he threw, and that's just a dangerous game to play with here. So, yeah, we'll see how it all plays out. Anything else you want to add, Packers, Colts-wise? Jordan Love officially did not practice today. No shock there. How about 4 kick returns for the Colts on Sunday? They had 9 all of last year.
I thought a couple of those, I'm like, what are we doing? We're in the end zone. Take it at the 30.
Yeah. And Green Bay will make you return it. At least it looked like they were doing that against Philly. I am curious, when Matt Gay does return, would that give the Colts a little bit more confidence in trying to sneak some yards away and, placing the kickoffs, at the 2, at the 3, forcing returns is what I'm getting at. We just saw Spencer Schrader, understandably, just booted out of the end zone every time.
Saquon Barkley in that game against Green Bay, 109 yards, 4.5 per carry, 2 rushing touchdowns. Jalen Hurts, 33 yards on the ground on 13 carries.
Yeah, let me be clear. Just because Jeff Hafley has history doesn't mean that they defended him well, because they did not. But, that is something to keep an eye on. Unless you got anything else, let's go to Twitter questions.
We've got a lot of them, so let's try to get as many as we can. We will start with Mason. He says, I can't help but look back to the draft where seemingly the main debate was Brock Bowers or a top cornerback, whether that was Quinyon Mitchell or Tyrion Arnold, but the Colts went defensive end. Complete no-show by all the Colts tight ends in the run and passing game, 0 receptions on 2 targets, and I'm not sold on any of the Colts corners besides Kenny Moore. I think JuJu looks grabby every bit as slow as his 40 time, and the other corner spot is even less solidified. Realizing hindsight is 20/20, but I can't help but grit my teeth when I see the top 2 corners in the draft are instant impact starters on 2 Super Bowl contending teams, while our number 1 pick made little to no impact on Sunday.
Yeah, obviously this seems fitting. Again, I'm not asking for the 15th overall pick to be a corner. Certainly I wasn't clamoring for it back in April. I was totally fine with the Latu pick. And can I mention something about Latu?
Yes.
The box score you get after an NFL game is black and white stats.
Mm-hmm.
A pass, a catch, a tackle.
Quarterback hit.
Thank you. The gray area comes with pressures a little bit more. Latu was recorded with 2 pressures from Pro Football Reference. If you look at last season, I think Samson Ebukam led the Colts defensive ends with 21. Kwity had 17. I think Tyquan had 14. So think about that. If he had 2 Latu on Sunday, and you times that by 17, that's 34. That would be 13 more than Ebukam had last year. That'd be 17 more than Kwity Paye had last year. That'd be 21 more than Tyquan Lewis had last year.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm getting at,
disruption.
Right. And what I'm getting at is yes, you want Latu to finish some plays, but for anybody that focused on Latu, he did some disruption. Again, you obviously want him to make plays and really create the big plays, but consistent disruption is important as well. And he was able to do that for the most part on Sunday. Yeah, part of the reason why I wasn't, standing on a table for the 15th overall pick at a corner is there is a little bit of you have tried kind of the young corner route.
Mm-hmm.
I was a little bit more of how about some veteran insurance? I can get we need to let the young guys play. I can sit here and yes, but again, to me, it was so much rooted in insurance. And when you don't draft the corner till round 5 with Jalen Simpson, and again, Simpson was a free safety that you're turning to a corner. Micah Abraham round 6, and you don't touch it all in free agency. That to me is what is so head scratching. And nothing in free agency. Dallas Flowers is a healthy scratch week 1. Yeah.
How do you feel about Jalen Jones? Because I feel like a lot of people overlook him just because he was, a 7th round pick. And if he was the 2nd round pick, I think he would get a little more respect than he
that's probably
doesn't
fair.
get.
Yeah. I think that's probably fair. I think Jalen Jones had some nice moments. I thought, Sunday was probably a little up and down for him. But no, I think Jalen Jones is, when we're asking for potential answers moving forward in the secondary, he's certainly on the list, and I don't view him in a negative light. Again, I don't, call him an all-pro by any means, but I think Jones has shown some. You watch him and you're like, okay, I can see why he was a 5-star recruit.
Mm-hmm.
And again, he had some safety background, going to Texas A&M. I'm not anti Jalen Jones.
Brett states, it's clear that Anthony Richardson's biggest area for improvement is accuracy on intermediate routes. Is that an area where quarterbacks have historically been able to make considerable improvement? I want to be over the moon excited about what we did see on Sunday, but I am also trying to remain at least somewhat realistic about growth potential.
It's interesting. Brett brings this up. We had Will Hewlett, the quarterback coach for Anthony Richardson, the individual QB coach down in Florida. We had him on right after the draft, probably a week after the draft. And he pretty much mentioned this as like the biggest area for improvement. Basically, it's you don't have to throw 99-mile-per-hour fastball every time.
Mm-hmm.
When do you throw the other velocities? When do you throw the other pitches? I'm a golf nerd. I think there are times where like you throw the pitching wedge arc instead of the punch 5-iron arc for our golf audience out there. That maybe resonated with about 3 people out there. You understand the baseball analogy, though. Sometimes, as weird as it sounds, you need to throw a knuckleball arc instead of a cutter on the inside corner type of arc. That's, being a quarterback is kind of like being a shortstop. You can throw from different arm angles. Not everything's just, your little 2-hopper ground ball and you're fielding balls, during an inning. And sometimes you're going to your left, you're going to your right, and all of those things. So, I think being realistic about growth potential is probably a good way to put it. And I'll reiterate what I said earlier about the 2 things I want to see him work on. It's just, 36% is a really high percentage for what Houston got on his pass attempts. 7 of 19. That's got to get better. And again, a few more singles. And if you do that, you've got you got a lot to work with. As long as the health cooperates, which, he did say today, he felt a little sore on Monday, getting used to, being hit for the first time in 11 months, which is very understandable. But, I'll go back to that quote that, when we read off that anonymous quote from, Mike Sando to those quarterback tiers.
Mm-hmm.
One of the coaches, executives around the league said, I'm not sure they can find an offense that doesn't expose him to injury. Week 1, he took a lot of hits.
Oh, yeah.
Is that survivable? That, I think, is a question you walk away from week 1 of, like, it's probably a fair thing to ask.
Well, he took like 5 hits maybe? The 2 sacks, and then I think he had 3 runs where he got hit?
Sounds right. It just
maybe
seems
4,
like,
because he had the slide and the run out of bounds.
It seems like the 5 he took were vicious.
Oh, yeah.
Penalized flag. And, I asked Shane that on Monday. In Shane's own way, I think he pretty much said, I'm pissed off, but I'm not going to get fined.
Flippin asks, what defensive adjustments are you expecting before week 2 or when we play a real quarterback again?
Well, that's probably, that's probably the better way to put it. I thought you had some disguise and some of that stuff. I thought you had some creativity in terms of mismatching or mixing the safeties, the fronts. Are you going to play 10 defensive linemen again?
Yes.
Is that what you want to do? Is that really the best, mode? 9 of them played at least 15 snaps. It's not like you had little rotation of that group. I thought, as much as I harped on the linebackers, and I still think the linebackers should have offered some more playmaking, I think they would tell you that there was a lot of garbage in their face. There was a lot of Houston Texan O-linemen in their face.
Yeah.
And some of that's on your D-line. Now, again, how much of that is scheme? It's a scheme that's very predicated on getting upfield. And I think if you saw at times, Houston's offensive line just kind of said, all right, Olay your way into the backfield. And if we throw a quick hitter at you, all of a sudden Mixon might be to the second level before you blink. So I think they did a really nice job of, again, getting guys in the faces of Franklin and Speed. And maybe you aren't as just crazy gap aggressive. Because with Willis, your gap integrity in the pass rush game is going to have to be there. That is different than Stroud as well.
One of the earlier questions about tight ends, and he mentioned Brock Bowers. Joel Erickson brought up a fascinating point to me and Jake on our show Wednesday afternoon, that he's like, they only had 2 active. So he was like, maybe they just weren't a part of the week 1 game plan.
They only had 2
active tight ends, Mo Ali Cox and Andrew Ogletree.
Granson.
Oh, yeah, Kylan.
Yeah, 3. Mm-hmm.
But maybe they just weren't involved in the week 1 game plan.
I'm trying to think what their snap counts were. I think it was like 27, 25, and
like 15, I want to say. Actually, that's actually a decent number, honestly. I mean, they only had 45 snaps, tight end wise. I mean, yeah, I think a lot of the offensive numbers you look at, you do have to remind yourself, just like 45 offensive plays. That's actually why I kind of disagreed with Shane post game. Shane was asked, why didn't the run game get going? Shane's like, I could have called more run plays. I'm like, Jonathan Taylor had 16 carries and 45 snaps. That's like the same percentage Joe Mixon had. Mixon had 30 and 79. 30 carries and 79 snaps.
Mm-hmm.
So percentage-wise, yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it here. Granson, 25 snaps. Allie Cox, 18. Ogletree, 12. Yeah, I mean, that's probably what you would expect. Now, actually, I think we had a Twitter question about this. I think we had a little question about downs and opening up a little bit more of the wideout personnel grouping. So I'll hold off until that.
Sam says, I hope you can give us a little inside look at how you guys were reacting to that Anthony Richardson, Alec Pierce touchdown on the next podcast if you haven't recorded already.
Well, Sam, you are in time. It takes a lot for me, and I think Mike Chappell, I sit next to in the press box, would echo this. It takes a lot for me to have an audible moment. Like a very big audible moment.
Are we talking like, oh, bleep, or
I think I said holy shit when the ball was in the air.
Okay. We're a family program. I was trying to prevent the profanity.
Yeah. Sorry. I'm trying to give you the exact picture of how it was.
As a father of two, I thought you would have a better mouth, but it sounds like we need to wash it out with soap.
Yeah. I think Maddie and I will be parents that will offer a cuss word or two here or there. It's one of the greatest plays I've ever seen.
I would agree.
mean, it's the greatest throw I've ever seen from a quarterback. I genuinely mean that. And, again, there are fourth down moments, down 4 with 1:43 on the clock, that certainly time and score do matter. But just purely throws, he slips, he's going to his left, and he uncorks it 66 yards in stride. And he has the gumption to still attempt it. And he pulls that off. I mean, it's insane. It was such a unbelievable throw by him. And yeah, I mean, I was I cannot believe I just saw that type of play. I mean, I literally, for the next like 2-3 minutes, I was trying to do math in my head of how long the pass was in the air.
65.3 yards, right? Is what Next Gen Stats had it. Next Gen Stats had it at.
Absolutely absurd.
I thought the throw to Doolin was more impressive.
The throw to Doolin is a frozen rope. To me, the combination of the arc and the distance, though, and under pressure. The Doolin one, I know he rolled a little bit. I think he maybe had footwork a little bit to his right. And that was a much cleaner pocket. That pocket wasn't clean on the throw. Incredible. Yeah. And I had to watch Riley Leonard throw that ball in the fourth quarter.
Well, it's because he has a labrum issue.
You kidding me?
Kevin, that's why.
Yeah.
JD would like to know, what do the Colts see in the defensive scheme that has kept Gus Bradley's job? We consistently allow career completion percentages to mediocre quarterbacks in the, quote, stop the big plays, so our opponents massacre our time of possession. Where are the blitzes considering our inexperienced secondary? This might just be a rant from week 1, overreaction, but in the last 3 years, I haven't seen a reason for us to keep our defensive scheme.
Good. Fair question. Okay, why? Why have the Colts kept this? First off, Chris Ballard is a huge 4-man front guy. He did not like the 3-man front in the Pagano era. I think he likes the upfield nature of that defensive line group. You're not necessarily absorbing blocks with massive lane integrity. You're getting upfield right away. And for the most part, I think it's a limiting of big plays. But yeah, again, 28th in points allowed each of the last 2 years. And as I've said, I don't think you can point to the turnover-filled 2023. 2022 you could. 2023, I don't think that you could do that. So, we oftentimes get into these discussions, Eddie. How much is it personnel? How much is it coaching? I think at times I've probably been a little bit more into scheme. But if you start really looking at the draft picks and the money the Colts have spent on defense, it's rather wild how much investment is there. And I don't think you can ignore that either. So, again, it'll be something to monitor. I did think we saw a little bit of a different Gus Bradley in week 1 from a not just relying on, here we are, cover 3 and, playing pretty obvious personnel groupings in terms of where guys are lining up and things like that. But, Again, the track record of Heineke, Browning, and PJ, that can't happen on Sunday.
Now, our next Twitter question is from a guy, I assume, named Irwin.
Oh, yes, Irwin. From down under, correct?
I was about to say, you can't be named Irwin and not be from Melbourne, Australia.
Look at that. Great pronunciation on Melbourne. You sound like Will Power.
As expected, the Anthony Richardson roller coaster was in full swing against the Texans. To me, he possesses all the traits you can't teach. This is from Irwin. Accurate deep ball and poise in the pocket, for example. The biggest part of his game that needs to be sharpened up is his short to intermediate throwing accuracy. I would think that part of the young professional quarterback's game would be the easiest to learn or progress in. What are your thoughts on this? Thanks and keep up the great work. I never miss a pod, all the way from Melbourne, Australia.
Look at that.
Now, there's a PS, and I'm not going to actually do more of this.
Whoa. You got to read it.
I'll read it. He says, PS, can you get Eddie to do his best Aussie accent, the guy that you used to do the pods with? He says Jake maybe, but I'm thinking it's either Joey or Chris Presley, Joey Molinaro or Chris Presley.
I would guess Joey, given his unbelievable talents.
He said, did one once, and I'd give it a 2 out of 10. He asked me to do it, but I'm not going to do it.
Oh, come on. Can you sneak it in at some point when we're least expecting it?
I'll try. I thought I did a little bit there on the Melbourne, but...
How about that? Shout out to Irwin. Shout out to Eddie there. Yeah, poise when it comes to old Anthony. You know, the accuracy you would think would be the easiest to teach. Poise and arm strength, to me, are borderline impossible to teach. I just think poise is so innate. There are some reps that maybe could get you there, but boy, I think that's just a really hard trait to fundamentally teach. And again, Will Hewlett, you go back to his quarterback's coach, I mean, he's mentioned some of that underneath stuff. So, it's different. I mean, you watch Flacco throw early on in practice, you watch Anthony throw, you see some of those misses. So again, how much of that can be a little bit of footwork? How much of that is just, the kid that hit puberty before everybody's throwing 90 miles per hour on the mound, eventually that catches up.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually does that pitcher become a 3-pitch pitcher or not? That's what Anthony Richardson's got to figure out. And again, knowing when to use that, knowing when to use those sorts of things.
Just a few Twitter questions left. Alex, Sunday's game had my blood pressure through the roof. Defense gave up 10-yard cushion on short yardage situations, and Nico Collins beat the Colts again. Now, do you think we're starting to feel how Houston did with T.Y. Hilton?
I would say that is, yes, that is accurate.
$25 million in cap space and not using it as always. Will we ever do anything differently than what we've been doing that hasn't worked? Jesus, it's insanity.
Look at that.
But we have the mighty blue chip general manager, Chris Ballard.
Will you,
right?
Before I answer that question, will you look up the Colts injury report? They just tweeted out and go ahead and let our audience know on that end. I'm going to do the same here. But indeed, Julian Blackmon did not practice. That's shoulder. Isn't that the one he hurt last year?
Well, it depends if it was the left or the right. We don't know that part, right?
That is a good point.
Let me pull up the injury report.
Kwity Paye did not practice due to hamstring.
Yep, and, I've got it now.
Yeah, go ahead and wrap it
So
up.
Julian Blackmon did not participate. Shoulder injury. DeForest Buckner, back injury, did not participate. Kwity Paye, hamstring injury, did not participate. Josh Downs, ankle injury, limited participant. Kicker Matt Gay, hernia, full participant.
So Buckner has done the pitch count thing, I think, twice in his Colts career. That'll be something to keep an eye on.
When he had the UCL injury, was one of them, right? The elbow?
The Rams game, if my memory serves me right. I think there's a Titans game in there as well. What'd you say, hamstring for Kwity?
Yes.
So again, that'll be
would
something.
Explain the ginger walk that you saw earlier.
I don't think I saw. Well, I didn't. How else would I have said he wasn't practicing? I didn't see Julian Blackmon. I guess what I'm getting at is Kwity Paye was at practice. Julian was not, for whatever that is worth. So, boy, those are some notable names on that list. 3 really notable names. So those will be some things to watch as the week moves along. Okay, question. Ballard, Jesus, what else did they say?
$25 million in cap space.
Yes, yeah. Again, I actually thought you saw a little bit more disguise, from the safeties at least, a little bit of interchanging. But, again, Nick Cross is, right there on Stephon Diggs on the biggest fourth down of the game. He just, wide open with that cushion there. So, to the cushion point. And, hell, Diggs had plenty of cushion on his first touchdown there in the end zone there. And, yes, Collins did beat you down the field. So, yes, my definition of blue chip is slightly different than Jim Mercer's definition.
Biggest win for Cody on Sunday was Anthony Richardson, gaining 4 quarters of experience and coming out healthy. When is the last time the Indianapolis Colts have had a quarterback that makes you feel like you're never out of the game? Richardson definitely has issues and obviously is nowhere near a finished product, but he gives you something different from that position.
Boy, he certainly does.
Yeah, he does.
How about the second Pierce one? That was a 3rd and 15.
You said, all right, go up and get it. Go grab the rebound.
And he just gives you a chance. And look, man, there's going to be plays this year where Pierce doesn't come down with it, but bring out the flag. And that thing's 50 yards. That's a spot foul. So, it's, yes, he does not, you feel like you were in it. Yeah, you got to go back to luck. Certainly.
Sticking with the Colts offense, Sam asks you, are you at all concerned that the Colts offense was too boom or bust on Sunday? He feels like we had a really hard time sustaining long drives and were the only able to put points on the board because of big plays by Richardson or the block punt, putting the Colts in great field position. Love the work that you do.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. I appreciate that. Anthony actually pretty much answered this exactly how I think you would want him to answer it today, of like, there's a healthy balance between, yes, obviously creating explosive plays is great, but there's still some benefit to having some of the methodical drives. So I do think that is really key for this team to find that. Not only does it hurt your defense, but, it also kept Houston pretty fresh defensively as that game moved along. And you couldn't get the wear and tear and the grindy nature that I think you would like to get as well. So, there's a balance with that, but I do think it is something that is really, really important. Can you do both? Because, there are going to be some teams that are literally going to say, hey, we are not, with Richardson, he'll certainly try to test you in this department, but there's going to be some teams that are going to say, guys, no way. We're keeping everything in front of us. That dude can't beat us 9 plays, 80 yards. He can't. That's what Richardson's going to have to show.
On the last podcast, something that stood out to Joel was that you mentioned Chris Ballard said this year's defensive line was the strongest in his tenure, and his philosophy of strength of the trenches was still key. However, it seems like Richardson had significantly less time than C.J. Stroud to process, and I think Joe Mixon is still running inside Lucas Oil Stadium as we speak. Is there an issue with Ballard's philosophy in general in today's NFL, or is he just not putting the right people in place to succeed? Thanks, and love the pod.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you, Joel. You have paid and invested to be elite, and I've certainly questioned that sort of commitment. Like, to me, I look at it and think, man, right now, 20 dudes in the trenches, is that necessary?
No.
When this is where you're at right now from a secondary standpoint. I've gone over the exercise before. If you look at the top 10 kind of highest paid Colts, I don't think it fits the bill for, again, what is needed in today's NFL. There's been many times, if you want to look at Houston specifically, Eddie, where I've thought the Colts have the better roster, 1-53, but they're better at the premium spots. And just look at last year's team. Stroud, Nico, Will Anderson Jr., Derek Stingley, Laramie Tunsil. Those are some pretty high level players.
Oh yeah,
at those spots.
It's a good nucleus.
Now again, 1-53, I think it's a little different, but that is. I think that's a fair point. So yeah, overall philosophy, certainly. I don't think it's bad to be highly investing into the trenches, but it would not be. I don't think it's the ideal blueprint necessarily when you're trying to see what wins in today's NFL.
Joyce asks, do the Colts call up Shaq Leonard? That defensive run game can use any help it can get.
Will we ever see Shaq in the NFL again?
I don't think so. Yeah. You talk about a fall off.
Right. Injuries, man. It's just, granted, I think there were times that, Shaq as a run defender might not be the answer either there. So, yeah, personnel-wise, it's going to be the same. You would expect that group to be better. Again, past history would say that you're better, but, teams are definitely going to try and see what the Colts got there.
2 questions left. We got time for both, or we only got time for one?
Let's do one.
Okay, JJ, on your podcast, you said that the Colts cut 6 late-round draft picks from the last 2 drafts. Will this affect Chris Ballard's preference to trade down for more draft picks? Any chance he'll trade up for fewer but higher quality picks? Colts record is 55-60-1 underneath Ballard.
Yeah, I've always been curious as you get deeper into the tenure, do you become more of a quality versus quantity in the draft? That's not been Ballard's MO. But again, that is something to me you just pointed out, JJ, how many draft picks they cut. I think they cut Titus Leo today off the practice squad too.
Yeah,
he was a 6th-round pick from a couple years ago. So, yeah, I understand the draft's an element of a crapshoot. I think there are times to collect those picks and to operate in that manner. And, Zaire Franklin, for example, in year 2 of your regime is a great example of a dart that works out. But I also think some of the more premium darts work out as well. And sometimes you're trading those late. I mean, the Texans traded Joe Mixon for a 7th-rounder.
Yeah.
Do you think they're happy with that? Or do you think they're really pissed off about not getting that 248th selection? That could have been whoever. So there are obviously examples on both sides of it. But yes, I think it's a fair question to ask, especially at this point in the regime, especially when you brought back as much. They were team running back for, all the starters there. That aspect to it as well.
You're 1-0. I'm 1-0. Max Bowen is 0-1. What's your prediction for the game on Sunday?
23-13 Colts. Yeah, Willis is, I just can't bet on Willis. No way. No way, shape, or form. Make him look like he has no experience. Make him, again, at times, I think Browning and Heineke, since they started each of those games specifically, you let them settle into it way too easily early in a game. You do that to these guys, especially at home, all of a sudden they get a little confidence. They get a little joke because Green Bay's got some dudes.
Mm-hmm.
Green Bay I think is a better team than maybe Atlanta was late last season. So yes, I will go 23-13.
When will Max Bowen's prediction be out?
We have not done it yet. We got to be outdoors. I mean, we got to be in the elements. So I hope he's ready. I brought out the Packers helmet last night so he get used to it a little bit. I think there's an internal bias with the Colts for him. We'll put the Packers on the right side. We got to make sure that we do this right and see if he can regroup. That was not a good week 1 performance from him.
I've got Colts doubling him up 26-13.
There you go. He's Eddie Garrison. I'm Kevin Bowen. Colts Corner with Kevin Bowen. Week 2 signing off. Talk to you Monday.